Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a video and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Today, I'm privileged to have a very senior HR leader, and I do believe that he's probably the most followed HR leader on LinkedIn, Mr. Prabir Jha. Prabir, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ashutosh. A pleasure.
Thank you. Prabir is the founder and CEO of the Prabir Jha People Advisory. He was just mentioning to me that from Stephens, he went to the civil services and he was with the Indian Ordnance Factories. And he's worked with several companies, Thermax, Tech Mahindra, Dr. Reddy's, Tata Motors, Reliance, and Cipla. So Prabir, tell me, what would you say are three key milestones in your career or your life?
So Ashutosh, when I look back, for someone who's kind of lived a life which was absolutely unimagined when I look back to school. Yeah. But three key milestones. One is, I think, after school in Patna to come to St. Stephen's, Delhi. Mm-hmm. Because I think the exposure, the outlook, the kind of people you had around you, and you name it, people, who were Miss Indias, people who were big sports people, people who finally went on to big academic jobs, and of course a huge number of people who, the alumni included, right, but many aspiring to be civil servants. And that's really what I wanted to do. So Stevens gave that exposure, perspective, self-confidence, and outlook. And otherwise, I was relatively a small town boy till that time.
Okay.
So going to St. Stephen's was definitely something which was in some ways life-changing. And 5 years in college, it almost changed me. And then if I have to pick, the next big thing was getting into the civil service. So I was writing my master's finals when the UPSC results were out. So it was like a PPO from the President of India, Okay. You move out of college and you became a Sahab overnight. And that's a big transformation.
Correct.
From a Chokra boy who's kind of latching onto a DTC bus to suddenly someone saluting you as you land at the airport was a very big change. And that was almost a dream come true. And I had a lot of opportunity of working with the Ministry of Defense, the Indian Ordnance Factories and stuff like that. And so that was a very different experience. And that's where my tryst with HR in some ways started. So I think today what I am, when I look back, maybe this was destined. And the third big milestone, I think, would be getting out of the civil service.
Okay.
So, ironically, so
not many people leave.
They don't. And I was among the earlier people who actually quit. Okay. Many people today quit, but they actually take voluntary retirement after 20 years. A pension is guaranteed. I quit. I left all my pension and gratuity claims. So in 10 years, I left the government and I came to the big bad corporate world that in many ways much better than me. And coming from a family which knew only the civil service, it was almost blasphemous. And I came out for a salary of 4 lakhs when I look back, and my dad was shocked that you don't leave the civil service for a paltry salary. Of course, it was 99, but still, 4 lakhs. But it's been a dream career, and so I have no complaints. So these three things: getting to Stevens, getting into the civil service, getting out of the civil service.
Terrific. So, Prabir, let's talk about your people advisory, about the Prabir Jha People Advisory.
That's right.
Tell me about the scope of work you do.
So, I'm still a sole proprietor, the sole mind with the firm. I've not added people. It's still an experiment, to be honest. And essentially, the focus of Prabir Jha People Advisory was, how do I offer many more organizations who cannot necessarily have a Prabir Jha or such kind of people, but we are able to access that experience, that perspective, that wisdom, and therefore in the process help many more companies and organizations and individuals get better. So I offer basically a couple of areas of work. One is I offer strategic advisory. I help organizations of different scale and size of stepping back and redraw their own aspirations, and therefore look at the interface of strategy with the organizational readiness, preparation, tweaks, changes, which is the entire thing, all the way from the board to your talent systems, to your culture,
Right.
to your different HR practices. So that's the one big piece of strategic advisory. But
Hmm.
I use the word advisory and not consulting because I don't do PPTs, Excel sheets, and the routine. It's
Hmm.
the idea is more first to
Thinking
step back and get them to think through,
Correct.
right? And that is, so that's the one thing I do. The second thing I do is very much like, the passion you're also nursing beyond the podcast that you do is executive coaching.
Okay.
So I do coach CXOs of organizations, and it's something that I've kind of done naturally over so many years. So that's an offering that I do. Third, which I've not really planned to do, but it came very naturally when some people started reaching out to help with helping find and evaluate and recommend talent, for either the corporate functions or the C-suite. So I do a bit of that. And fourth, of course, I have some clients who want me to do almost monthly, talk sessions with their hypos or their talents and, and stuff like that. So it's a way of kind of helping coach and develop the hypo. So those are the kind of things that I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it's on a lighter note, but in the old days, we used to have a personnel manager and an industrial relations manager.
Correct.
And, all that seems to have now got merged into human resources.
Mhm.
Over the last 20 odd years that you have been associated with this specialization, how have you seen HR evolve?
So Ashutosh, in all honesty, in intent, it has evolved.
Okay.
In practice, and now that I advise clients and see it a little from the ring side, I think we are still a halfway house. Where we are wanting to get to the new world, but we are still in the old world, and of course there are different shades of companies and leaders. So, but at a very gestalt level, what has changed is HR has definitely moved to being a strategic partner,
Correct.
and so it's very difficult to explain even to my dad what I do because for him it is still classical personnel.
Correct.
But today, for me, HR and the way I have at least lived my life is I have felt I have been more the chief organization officer than a chief HR officer.
Okay.
Because there is no dimension of an organization
Correct.
that HR cannot, doesn't, or will not, if it wants, be able to impact. For me, my thesis is anything which can accentuate value or can prevent value erosion is within the purview of HR. Whether, therefore, it is all the way from the way the boards are constituted. Now, someone might argue, is that really a formal HR job? I don't know. But for me, I've been actively engaged and continue in my current role also to help think about board composition, the kinds of board. What kind of an organization architecture and design would be relevant as the dreams of the organization or as the context of operations change? Of course, talent, which I have always believed is continually redefined definition. You cannot say talent is this for 30 years anymore. So how do you redefine? How do you anticipate? How do you, coaching, the entire gamut of skilling, both behaviorally and in terms of the newer functional areas. Culture. For me, I do a lot of work in this area of culture re-engineering because people think culture is very soft and nice moral science words, but culture is hardcore business accretion. Absolutely. Right? Dimensions of culture. And even boards don't fully understand it. It's hardly an agenda item. So how do you get them to understand that? And even look at enterprise risk from what I call a people capability perspective, right? What could derail the organization which may have run a long time? So very clearly, the evolution is to move away from industrial canteens and managing unions. I'm not saying that's not still within the larger purview, but it can be delegated to people at a certain stage in their lives and expertise. But I think the new age HR is really about reimagination and redrawing the organization, both the hard and the soft dimensions, to be fit for purpose, given the aspirations.
So, Prabir, you spoke about culture.
Yeah.
Large multinationals, large organizations have a culture that's evolved over years. A very large number of people who will listen to you and me speak are startup entrepreneurs or are wanting to be entrepreneurs. So my question to you on culture is, how does a startup build culture?
It's a great question, Ashutosh. Let me respond by sharing an experience I had with possibly two people who built one of the most exciting entrepreneurial success stories in India. Many years ago, I had the opportunity of chatting with them, and I told both of them separately that, if there is one thing that you must focus on, and most entrepreneurs don't think about it,
Correct.
please focus on your culture. For example, do you want to be the United States of culture, which means you are wanting to kind of attract talent from all kinds of backgrounds and become the melting pot?
Right.
What kind of culture will that demand and become? Or are you going to be prescriptive and say, this is the culture and hire for what I hate, culture fit? I don't agree at all strategically with that culture fit.
Yes.
So for a startup, and I enjoyed that conversation, I said, you can replace technology, you can even change business models, you can change many things. Culture is very difficult to change. So when you are a startup, you must definitely telescope yourself beyond the point of survival to a point where you will be sustainable. You have to take both lens. And very clearly, you must say, therefore, if this is the market I want to play, if this is the stakeholder community I need to tango with, what kind of a culture would be the right choice for me? And I never for one say this is good culture and this is bad culture. The issue is it a strategically aligned culture?
Correct.
And I enjoy these conversations with boards and entrepreneurs, because you need to chisel away, and sometimes there are choices to make.
Correct.
Because once you've decided, so it's good to say I want to be an entrepreneurial culture. What does it mean? It does not mean you'll be stupid. It's not that you will be throwing good money behind bad money.
Correct.
But the question is, are you going to celebrate failures? Right? And if you celebrate failures, what will be metaphors of that celebration?
Correct.
Right? So the question is, and you can't write 20 items and say this is my culture. You need to pick 3 or 4 things, because this is defining. And it's possible, even for startups, you might say this is non-negotiable. But I will allow subcultures to get spawned or to get created, because Ashutosh, look at it this way. Each one of us as a leader also bring our flavor to the cultural reality
and
of
our
an
biases.
ecosystem. And our biases, right? So I personally believe that subcultures are good to have, as long as subcultures do not totally subvert the larger culture. But the most important thing, particularly for entrepreneurs, is please do not hire people. Please do not build a culture which will just sustain the way you think. And this is the biggest trap for entrepreneurs, because they believe, I'm the entrepreneur, I know exactly what I want to do, and I want everyone like me. I believe that there must be a lot more of pluralism in cultures, that the founding team or the people that they get in, because that is what will keep your entrepreneurial experiment always alive, tested, contested. But in that process, you will continue
Fabulous.
to succeed.
What an amazing answer. So, now let's move on a little bit. You worked with so many different CEOs, so many organizations, startups. As you look at them, and then you also said that the HR manager's role is a much bigger role. What are some of the key values that you believe in? And the follow-up to that is, what do you think are some of the important qualities a CEO should have?
So let me try and recall some values which I have held dear. And maybe some of them will also overlap with the CEO. But so the first, very clearly, Ashutosh, to me, is integrity. And people often think integrity is about financial integrity. That's model science, yes.
Yeah.
For me, integrity is congruence of thinking, doing, and acting or behaving. Right? It's that entire congruence. And I have felt that at the end of the day, stand up for what you think you believe, say what you believe without fear or favor, which unfortunately I cannot say for many people in the corporate world. Maybe they are being more practical, but I have felt, and it's worked for me, speak your mind. You're there not to say yes, sir, 3 bags full. And finally, act and execute. If you make a promise, deliver the promise. So don't make the promise. So integrity is very, very central. It's really your reputation. The second that I think which is very important is trust. For me, I have never been a micromanager. I also don't necessarily believe I am the best at everything I do. I can't. And I would like to believe most of us are not the best at everything that we are so formally tasked to do.
Correct.
In my life, whether it has been at home or with people at home, or it's been with my colleagues at the workplace, trust has been a very pervasive belief. Of course, trust is earned. I realize that. But I think if I trust, I trust. I don't second guess. I don't, and it's vice versa. I need my sense of space, right? So I have struggled with people who have wanted me to report to them on every little sneeze in the company, because I honestly think that's not that guy's job. And so trust for me is very important. Give trust and receive trust. The third that I have felt very, very strongly about is vulnerability. God has been very kind to me, and I would like to believe I was not an idiot. But I also believe I'm very comfortable being vulnerable. And I like people who are vulnerable. So, because only when you're vulnerable are you willing to learn and learn from anyone, irrespective of rank, hierarchy, and context. I learn from my driver. I learn from the sabzi wala from whom I buy my sabzi. I posted on LinkedIn a post on this because the way some of these guys can do some things I can't. Humility will flow only when you're being vulnerable. Your sense of egalitarianism will flow only when you're vulnerable. So for me, vulnerability, and it takes so much pressure away when you don't have to wear a mask. So these are things, and maybe if I have to add two more which comes to mind, one is courage. At the end of the day, when I was in the government, a lot of my unions and teams would always say, "Apna jhaza bahut dabang hai." Yes to yes, no to no. But I have felt in a lot of my CXO life and a lot of strategic transformation I led, you need to stick your neck out. You need to take your bets. And I have felt that leaders must demonstrate courage. They may fail. They may not always be right, but they must. And finally, gratitude. Ultimately, you have to be grateful for so many things that you unfairly received. People were nice to you. I always feel that I got far more love than I deserved. People who took bets on me, people who condoned my mistakes, people who looked the other way. And I think gratitude is a very, very redeeming. So these 4 or 5 things to me have been very strong values.
Very nice. So I'm now going to move to the next topic of our discussion, which is as such a well-known, established gender HR leader, I'm sure you've addressed issues of gender diversity, and you also work on getting boards diverse and balanced and so on. Tell me, is gender diversity in India more a lip service? And second, what can we do to genuinely bring diversity?
Ashutosh, you've touched a very raw nerve. This can get me onto a long one. I have always said that, my mother worked, my wife works, my daughter works. I think I have had the opportunity, particularly because for many years I've lived with HR and communications functions, which have had a lot of women and some outstanding women.
Correct.
But I somewhere feel that this issue of diversity has become so check the box kind of exercise, and sometimes more evocative than it needed to have become, right? And therefore, I've written a lot on this subject. I've gone and spoken, but unfortunately, I think I am a little bit more of an exception to the way I think. I don't think the issue is one of diversity, and particularly gender diversity. And this is because people just misunderstand. I think the problem, the more you look at it only from a gender perspective, you take only one slice of a demographic mix, right? For me, my thesis has been about pluralism. My thesis has been about meritocracy. If we can ensure and we can cross our hearts and say we will be meritocratic or we will be pluralistic, by default, even the gender representation will get taken care of because the biases will be removed.
Hmm.
But the minute you start talking about gender and therefore I need one person, like my wife sits on one of the boards
Hmm.
of a listed company, and someone who had reached out once earlier said, "Oh, we are looking for a woman director."
Hmm.
I said, "Just reject it.
Hmm.
You are there not because you're a woman. You are
Correct.
there because you're goddamn competent."
Yes.
Right? And unfortunately, even some women don't play this cause right in this ultra feminism of
Yeah.
saying, "Oh, this photograph of 10 CEOs, not one woman was there."
Ah.
Why? Why can't there be three? Why can't it be all women?
Correct.
So for me, gender is not to me the defining focus. And even if I look strategically, it could be all women, it could be all any demographic slice. Is that the best that this organization needs?
Hmm.
I mean, I've been in organizations where 50% of my management team we built was women. 50% of the board was women, right? The question was, it was not because we were in a quota system, because they happened to be women, but
Correct.
they were the best in their line.
Yeah.
And I think if in that process, it's like saying, "Oh, I need someone from East India and someone who is, from this community." To me, all this is tokenism. And I think somewhere we've thrown the baby out with the bathwater. So stand for pluralism, stand for meritocracy. You will automatically address your issue of gender, but don't do it the other way around, running leadership programs only for women. I mean, do you realize, unconsciously how you create, they versus
Right.
us?
Yeah.
And it doesn't work. Have more people be part of a leadership program who are women. But don't do things like that because, fighter pilots are women. Don't make it a big thing that, oh, because she's a woman, you're doing an extra favor, right? So that's the perspective I
Well
have on
said.
this.
Very, very well said. Well articulated. Thank you. So I'm now going to move to the last section of our conversation, Prabir, which is some questions
Yeah.
for you personally. I think we've got time for 2, maybe 3 questions.
Okay.
First, as you look back from where you are today, having done so much and achieved so much, what does success mean to Prabir as you stand today?
So for me, success is having helped companies, organizations, and people get to be more successful.
Okay.
The sense of having enabled individual success and corporate success through transformation, because that's what I've done all my life. It has been really something I have felt very good about, and it makes me feel I've succeeded. So success of others is my success.
Well said. My next question to you is on failure.
Yeah.
And I've often said this, I've spoken about it, that parents in India or Asia don't teach children it's okay to fail. Everyone's told first aana hai, head of the line, etc. And I believe that manifests itself in our behavior patterns as we get older. You come to Delhi, you have 9 cars all trying to get off from the traffic light first, right? And so on and so forth. We fail.
Right.
My question to you, Prabir, is what have been some of your learnings from some of your mistakes?
So I have had my share of appointments and disappointments.
Sure.
I've had my share of failures. But whenever I've had a setback or I've lived, it's not that I've not had a sense of remorse, hurt. Sometimes it's hurt. You just feel that it was unfair. It was, then you remind yourself many a times you got also the better part of life because that was equally unfair maybe. But the lesson that I have lived with is nothing is the end of the road. There is no cul-de-sac. The important thing is pause, reflect, learn, pick yourself up and start walking again.
Amazing. Yeah.
And it has always, worked with me. And some moments have been very tough personally because, those were moments where you thought someone let you down. Someone did not play fairly, right? And therefore you failed or you did not win or whatever else. But the question is, you hit the guy for 2 days and then you realize, that is for the man upstairs to take care of. Your job is to learn from the mistake, dust things off and start walking. And you realize actually you're walking as well, if not better.
Very nice. And my last question to you, and this is specifically for the thousands of young people who will be listening to us. What would your advice be to a young individual who's starting off on their journey in the corporate world?
So Ashutosh, for me, I've always told youngsters on fireside chats, and I'll repeat it today. Learn to live a life of convictions,
Okay.
not consequences.
Very nice.
So many people, do not realize, the possibilities that they were born for, just because they played safe, just because they studied what the peers studied, just because they got into jobs which gave them $1 more, right? Just because they did not follow their heart, right? And I feel you have to lead a life of convictions. Believe in what you want to believe. Believe in the power of your dreams. You may not realize everything tomorrow, but it is better to live a life which was you than to lead a life for someone else who wanted you to be whatever. Be hungry. Be hungry. Not hungry just for success, but hungry to learn. Hungry to give away. Hungry to show empathy. Hungry to learn. And as we just talked a little while back, wear your successes and failures lightly. Many a time we get bogged down. I see a lot, of comments when I write my social media posts, and I can almost make out these are people in their 20s. I can almost make out, right? And the sense I get is that how unfair is the world? How unfair is my organization? How unfair is my manager? The sense of skepticism is so strong so early in life.
Correct.
And my honest appeal is, you are lucky to get a boss who liked you, who was fair to you. You're lucky to work in an organization that, but the worst thing you can do is to push yourself harshly and to be unfair to yourself, because it then bogs you down. So I'm just saying, spread your wings, learn to flap, learn to fly, learn to get perched somewhere. It's okay, fly somewhere else. So again, therefore, lead a life of convictions, not consequences.
Fantastic. And on that incredible note of convictions versus consequences, Prabir, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure speaking to you. I'm sure thousands of people will really learn from this conversation. I have learned.
Thank you so much, Ashutosh. Thank you so much for having me on your show. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.